Welcome back to the Shadows Prevail. Whether you are listening from the comfort of your own home or streaming this on a late-night drive, thank you for joining us. I hope everyone is staying safe out there. I'm your host, and today, I have a story that is absolute nightmare fuel. If you're here for genuine, stomach-dropping horror, you are exactly where you need to be. Before we start, do me a favor and share this episode with your friends, because the story I'm about to tell you contains a massive warning. A warning about what happens when human greed crosses paths with ancient interdimensional entities. The title of today's story is Yakiha. It sounds strange now, but by the end of this video, that name is going to send chills down your spine. So, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. This story was sent to us by a viewer named Amitabh, who actually heard it from an older, trusted mentor in his life named Joy. The events took place in an incredibly isolated, heavily guarded area near the border of India and Pakistan, a place called Shakargarh now. Back in the day, right after the borders were drawn, there was this massive chunk of land, about 4,000 hectares, that nobody officially claimed. It was basically a no-man's land. It wasn't until the 1980s that the government finally took it over and started leasing it out to locals for farming. But because this land was pressed right up against the border mountains, it was deep in the wilderness. It was the kind of isolated, dead, silent forest where you constantly feel like you're being watched. People stayed away, but jump forward about 10 years to around 1990. A group of local guys decided to explore deep into this overgrown forest just to see what was actually out there. They spent hours hacking through the thick brush until they suddenly stumbled upon something that absolutely should not have been there. It was a massive, ancient occult shrine. But here is where things get really creepy. Even though the stone structure was clearly hundreds of years old, the inside was spotless. It looked like it was being actively cleaned and maintained. But by who? The guys looked around. There were 0 footprints in the dirt. Not a single trace of human activity. As they walked closer to the center of the shrine, the feeling of dread got heavier. Right in the middle of the room, there was a heavy, U-shaped execution block. An altar, used for ritualistic sacrifices. Scattered all around the dirt were the skulls and ribcages of various animals. But as they looked closer, their blood ran cold. Mixed in with the animal bones were human skulls. Panic immediately set in. They were standing in the middle of an active human sacrifice site. But despite the overwhelming fear, a few of them cautiously stepped further inside, and what they found next left them speechless. Resting near the blood-stained altar were 3 heavy executioner's blades. But they weren't made of rusted iron. They were made entirely out of solid gold. Seeing this, reality hit them hard. Nobody leaves solid gold weapons lying around in the woods unless they belong to a deeply dangerous cult, or something much worse. Realizing they were probably being hunted, they scrambled out of the forest, swearing to never return. They made it out safely. But there were 2 guys in this group who had a very dark reputation. These 2 were known thieves. On the way back to the village, greed took over. One of them whispered, "Bro, If we sneak back at night and steal just one of those solid gold blades, we are set for life. So, sticking to their incredibly stupid plan, the two guys headed back into the pitch-black forest that night. They were armed with nothing but a cheap steel flashlight. It was dead silent. They crept their way up to the temple and slipped inside. Right in front of them, gleaming in the flashlight beam, was the golden blade. One guy whispers, "You grab it." The other goes, "No way, you grab it." Finally, one of them says, "Fine, I'll take it." He stepped forward. But the absolute second his fingers touched the gold, the temperature in the room dropped to freezing. Out of nowhere, a massive, terrifying, hairy cryptid-like entity materialized right inside the room with them. The guy standing near the door saw this monster, completely lost his mind in pure terror, and instantly bolted out into the dark. As he was sprinting away, he heard a blood-curdling, agonizing scream echo from inside the shrine. It was his friend. The guy outside didn't stop. He ran for his life, sprinting blindly through the woods, fully expecting this massive creature to snatch him from the shadows at any second. But somehow, he made it out. He ran straight into the village, banging on doors, waking everyone up. People rushed out asking, "What happened? Why are you covered in sweat?" Obviously, he couldn't admit they went to steal from a cursed shrine. So, he lied. He told them that he and his friend were just taking a night walk, got lost near the temple, and some kind of wild animal attacked them. The villagers were terrified, but they refused to go into the woods at night. They waited until the crack of dawn. The next morning, a large, armed group of villagers headed into the forest to find the missing man. But when they arrived at the exact coordinates, the shrine was gone. They searched the entire surrounding area. Nothing. The massive stone structure had literally vanished overnight. But here is the most bizarre part. Right where the temple used to stand, there was a perfectly square 15 by 15 foot patch of completely bare dirt. The surrounding forest was totally overgrown with thick brush, but this exact square was spotless. It was as if the entire temple had been swallowed, hundreds of feet deep into the earth. And what about the thief who got left behind? They started searching the surrounding brush. Eventually, they found a trail of fresh blood. They followed it to a dark corner of the woods and found his head. Just his head. The rest of his body was completely missing. Looking at the clean cut on his neck, it was obvious that his head had been severed with a single brutal swing of a heavy blade. He hadn't been killed by an animal. He had been sacrificed, and it seemed that immediately after feeding on his blood, the ancient entity retreated underground, taking the entire shrine with it. Years went by. Slowly, the locals started clearing out more of the dark forest to use the land for farming. Eventually, they hacked away the thick brush right up to the edge of where that ancient temple used to be. But that specific 15 by 15 foot square of dirt, no one had touched it. It remained completely barren. Not a single weed or blade of grass would grow there. Because the surrounding area was mostly cleared out by the farmers, the village kids naturally started using that open space as a playground. And that is when the curse woke up again, one afternoon. A young local boy named Minar was out playing near the dirt patch with his friends. The area was pretty open now. But suddenly, Minar noticed someone standing near the edge of the barren dirt. It was an incredibly tall figure. A man, standing maybe 8 or 9 feet tall. He didn't look like a deformed monster. He just looked like an absolute giant of a human being. The giant looked down at Minar and warned him in a deep voice, "Hey kid, get out of here. Leave. And do not come back to this spot." But Minar was just a kid. He didn't fully understand the danger. As he kept playing, he found himself wandering right back toward that specific patch of dirt. It wasn't just curiosity. It was almost like he was being magnetically pulled to the spot. A bizarre paranormal attraction kept drawing him in, and every time he got close, the giant would appear out of nowhere, warning him again. "Don't come here. Leave." Nothing physical happened that day. That night, Minar went home and told his mom everything. He said, "Mom, I saw this massive giant man today. He kept telling me to go away." His mom completely brushed it off. She told him it was probably just a really tall outsider who leased the land from the government, and that he was probably getting ready to build something there. She had no idea that she was rationalizing a paranormal warning. The very next day, Minar went back out to play, and almost immediately, he started wandering toward that exact same patch of cursed dirt. He was in a total trance. People were calling out to him from a distance, "Hey Minar, come over here." He would briefly turn away, but then drift right back to the center of the square. Then, the shouting stopped. Suddenly, one of the villagers noticed Minar lying face down on the ground. When the locals started walking toward him, they froze in absolute horror. From a distance, it looked like Minar had been completely decapitated. People started screaming. They rushed toward his body, and as they got closer, the reality of what they were looking at set in. His head was still attached, but it had been smashed so forcefully into the earth that his neck was bent at a grotesque angle, and his face was completely buried deep into the packed dirt. Minar was dead. He had suffered massive blunt force head trauma. As the crying family pulled his body away, Minar's mother broke down. She told the rest of the family about the giant man from the day before. The village finally realized the giant wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Something dark and supernatural was luring people to that spot to feed, and it had just claimed another life. But the horror didn't stop with Minar. A day or two after his death, things escalated in a terrifying way. A teenager from the village named Dolan was walking near that same area with a group of friends. Suddenly, Dolan stopped dead in his tracks. He stood there, completely paralyzed, staring blankly into the empty trees. His friends walked up to him, confused. "Dolan? Bro, what's wrong? Why are you just standing there?" No answer. He wasn't even blinking. Finally, one of his friends reached out and grabbed his shoulder. The absolute moment they touched him, Dolan's entire body violently jerked. He immediately started acting erratic, his eyes completely glazed over. Terrified, his friends physically carried him back to his house. It wasn't even evening yet, but Dolan was losing his mind. And as soon as the sun set, Dolan's voice changed completely. It wasn't him speaking anymore. The entity inside him started yelling something highly specific. "Get the Exorcist. Bring Cleric Ryan here. Right now." For context, Ryan was the head cleric of a nearby sanctuary and a local demonologist. He was the guy the village called when things got dark. They sent for him immediately, and Ryan rushed over. But as the exorcist stepped onto the front porch of Dolan's house, before he even opened the door, he heard a voice whisper directly into the air around him. "Cleric, there is no need to cast your holy shields. Go inside. I need to speak with you." The exorcist was stunned. Usually when he deals with dark entities, they scream at him. They threaten his life, telling him to leave immediately. But this entity was being incredibly polite. Still, the exorcist wasn't stupid. He knew entities were master manipulators. He quietly recited his protective holy verses anyway, and walked inside, but the moment he entered the boy's bedroom, he felt it. This wasn't a low-level demonic parasite. The energy in the room was ancient, powerful, and strangely positive. Looking at the teenager, the exorcist realized the boy was possessed, but by an incredibly high-level interdimensional being before the exorcist could even begin his ritual. The entity speaking through the boy stopped him. "Cleric," the ancient voice said calmly, "I am leaving this boy's body now. Tonight, wait for me on the bench outside your sanctuary. I have urgent business to discuss with you." The other people in the room saw absolutely nothing. But the exorcist, with his spiritual vision, watched as a thick, white, smoke-like substance physically separated from the teenager's body. The smoke hovered in the air, briefly morphed into the shape of a wise, bearded old man, and then completely vanished into thin air. That night, exactly as instructed, the exorcist went back to his sanctuary. Just outside the main building, under the shadow of a massive pomegranate tree, there was a traditional wooden bench. The exorcist sat down in the absolute darkness, silently reciting his holy verses, waiting. Suddenly, the air grew incredibly heavy. Out of the shadows, a massive figure approached. It was a man, but he was standing at least 7 feet tall. He had a long flowing beard, and his eyebrows and eyelashes were completely white. But what was most striking was his face. It radiated a glowing, unnatural, but almost beautiful light. The entity greeted the exorcist with a polite, ancient blessing. The exorcist, staying completely calm, respectfully returned the greeting. Then, out of nowhere, an ornate, throne-like chair simply materialized into existence right next to the wooden bench. But before sitting down, the giant entity looked at the exorcist and asked, "With your permission, may I sit?" "Yes, of course. Please sit," the exorcist replied. Once they were seated, the entity leaned forward and began to speak. "Cleric, I have very urgent things to tell you. This is exactly why I possessed that boy today, just to get your attention. Now that you are here, I have left him unharmed. The things I am about to reveal to you are not just for your ears. Many people in this region need to know this truth. I am going to tell you the story of my life. It holds a vital warning. And once you know the truth, there is a task only you can perform, which is why I brought you here." The entity finally introduced himself. His name was Yakiha. To understand what happens next, you need to know a little bit of lore. In that part of the world, they call entities like Yakiha jinn. But to a Western audience, the best way to describe them is as ancient, shape-shifting, interdimensional beings. They aren't all evil demons. Some are incredibly intelligent, operating on a massive scale with their own tribes, their own kings, and their own armies. Yakiha explained that he was the king of a highly spiritual, elite faction of these beings, known as the Musaiba tribe. Yakiha looked at the Exorcist, his glowing eyes darkening with memory. To understand the evil that lives under that dirt patch, we must go back to the year 1909. At that time, the British were ruthlessly expanding their dark opium trade across the region. The local warlord, a powerful and highly respected man named Narayan, absolutely hated the opium trade. He wanted his people to grow food, not poison. He began violently shutting down the British operations. This sparked a massive turf war with a rogue British smuggler named Rover Ferry. Ferry wasn't military. He was just a ruthless, greedy businessman trying to build an empire. But he quickly realized that he couldn't beat the local warlord with just money or guns. Narayan had too much manpower. So, Ferry decided to use a darker advantage. He decided to use black magic. Ferry tasked his most loyal henchman to find a practitioner of the dark arts. The henchman eventually tracked down a 90-year-old Hindu occultist, a terrifying necromancer named Samarath Pun. Ferry met with the necromancer and told him he needed to completely annihilate the warlord and his entire army so the opium trade could thrive. The necromancer smiled. "I will do it," he said, "but it requires a very specific, ancient ritual. We need to perform the corpse head pull. For those who don't know, this is a highly classified, pitch-black necromancy ritual. According to local dark lore, if a man from a specific occult sect died, he had to be buried beneath exactly 25 feet of packed dirt. If someone dug up that exact grave on the 56th day after burial, severed the rotting corpse's head, and brought it to the sorcerer could use it to summon an apex-level, bloodthirsty demon from the underworld. An entity that would do whatever they wanted. Ferry didn't care about the dark consequences. He told his henchmen, "I will pay you so much money that you will never have to work another day in your life. Just go get the head." Driven entirely by greed, the henchman agreed. Exactly 56 days later, he went to the burial site in the dead of night and started digging. Digging 25 feet down by hand is insane, but he was desperate for the money. Eventually, his shovel hit the corpse. Because it had been 56 days, the body was severely decomposed. But when the henchman brushed the dirt off the corpse's face, he froze in pure, mind-numbing terror. The rotting face staring back at him looked exactly like his own dead father. It didn't open its eyes or speak, but the psychological horror was intense. The henchman knew it was a demonic illusion designed to break his mind, because his father had died years ago. Shaking violently, he hacked the head off, which wasn't hard since it was rotting, shoved it in a bag, and delivered it to Ferry, who handed it straight to the necromancer. But karma caught up with the henchman fast. Within 10 days, that man died a miserable, agonizing death. He developed a violently high fever, suffered massive, terrifying seizures from the sheer trauma of what he had seen in that grave, and passed away. Nobody even cared. Meanwhile, the necromancer, Samarth Pun, took the severed head deep into the forest, straight to that ancient stone shrine. He stood at the blood-stained altar and called out to the darkness, "My lord, I know you are here. I need your power." Suddenly, the air turned to ice. A massive, horrifying, hairy demonic beast materialized inside the temple. An ornate chair appeared out of nowhere. The beast sat down, and the necromancer placed the rotting, severed head right at its feet. The pact was sealed. Sitting on the wooden bench, the exorcist was deeply disturbed by the story. He looked at the giant, glowing entity and asked, "I understand the necromancer summoned a demon, but what does any of this have to do with you? You are a king of your kind." Yakiha sighed, his voice heavy with ancient regret. Because this necromancer was incredibly cunning, and he knew exactly how to trap a king. Yakiha leaned forward, his glowing eyes fixed on the exorcist. "You see, cleric, this necromancer didn't just deal with lower-level demons. Through his dark spies, he had managed to map out the invisible highways that my kind used to travel across the earth. To give you an idea of what he meant, think about human highways. We have massive interstate highways for heavy 18-wheelers, and you would never drive a massive semi-truck down a tiny dirt road. Well, in the spiritual realm, powerful interdimensional beings have their own massive, invisible, energetic highways that they use to travel across the globe. Samarathpun knew our roots, Yakiha explained. He would literally sit right in the middle of our highway and begin performing incredibly rare, ancient magic. He wouldn't try to trap us in bottles or cages. He wasn't stupid. Instead, he laid a psychological trap. My kind, just like humans, are incredibly greedy for power. When an entity saw him performing this god-tier magic, they would approach him, begging him to teach it to them. And that is exactly how he enslaved them. One day, Yakiha, the king of his tribe, was traveling down one of these energetic highways with 1,000 of his elite warriors. The necromancer knew he was coming. So, the dark sorcerer sat on the path and began performing a mythical ancient spell called soul binding, a spell that grants unimaginable power to whoever wields it. Seeing this, Yakiha fell right into the trap. Intoxicated by the thought of gaining this ultimate power, he ordered his massive army to return to their realm, while he stayed behind to learn the spell from the human. The necromancer agreed to teach him, but he set a very specific condition. "I will teach you at my home," the sorcerer smiled. "But to prove you'll actually show up, you have to leave something as collateral." "Leave what?" Yakiha asked. "The royal ring on your finger." Blinded by his desire for the spell, Yakiha thought, "No big deal. I'll just get it back later." He handed over his sacred ring and quickly flew back to his interdimensional tribe to check in before heading to the sorcerer's house. But when Yakiha took his seat on his throne, his royal court went dead silent. They started whispering, glaring at him with pure disgust. Yakiha roared, "Why are you disrespecting your king?" One of the tribal elders stood up, his voice dripping with anger. "You are no longer our king. Where is your royal ring? We know exactly what you did. Our spies told us you gave your sacred artifact to a filthy, dark human sorcerer. Just to learn a spell, you jeopardized our entire tribe for your own selfish greed. You are stripped of your title, and you are banished." Immediately, just like that, Yakiha lost everything. Panicking, he rushed straight to the necromancer's house to get his ring back, but the necromancer just smirked at him. "I'll give you your ring back, only if you win a war for me." Since Yakiha was stripped of his title, he was completely desperate. However, a small group of highly elite loyal warriors from his tribe had secretly followed him into exile. Yakiha agreed to the sorcerer's terms. He would fight the war, and wait for the perfect moment to strike, take his ring and leave. But Samarath Pun was playing a much darker game. He didn't fully trust Yakiha. He knew Yakiha was inherently a good entity, and might refuse to commit atrocities. That's exactly why the sorcerer had used the severed corpse head to summon the evil, hairy apex demon at the shrine. He wanted to use the demon to completely enslave Yakiha forever. The day of the war finally arrived. Rover Ferry, the British smuggler, officially challenged the local warlord to a battle at night. But Ferry was heavily outnumbered. A massive plague had recently swept through his camp, wiping out most of his men. Ferry was losing badly. He was down to his last 5 men, completely surrounded by the warlord's army. It was over. Right at that exact moment, Yakiha and his elite invisible warriors descended onto the battlefield. They fought on behalf of the British smuggler. The tide of the battle flipped instantly. The warlord's men were getting slaughtered by invisible forces they couldn't even see. The warlord himself was killed in the absolute chaos. But then, things went horribly wrong. Yakiha looked up and saw the night sky suddenly turn blood red. Emerging from the red glow was the terrifying hairy apex demon, the one the necromancer had summoned using the corpse head. And it wasn't alone. It brought an army of dark, bloodthirsty entities with it. But they didn't attack the humans. They instantly ambushed Yakiha's warriors, slicing their heads off one by one in the dark. Yakiha summoned his spy in a panic. "What is going on?" The spy reported back instantly. The human necromancer summoned this demon. His plan is to let this demon weaken you, trap you, and force you to be a slave to both the sorcerer and the demon forever. Hearing this, Yakiha absolutely snapped. Moving faster than the speed of light, he teleported straight to the forest edge, right to where the necromancer was hiding alone in the dark. In a split second, Yakiha sliced the human's head clean off his shoulders. He reached down into the dirt, snatched his royal ring back from the dead sorcerer's hand, and slipped it onto his finger. The moment the ring touched his skin, his full god-like power returned. He was the king, again. And instantly, his entire massive 1,000-man army materialized right behind him. Yakiha teleported back to the battlefield and unleashed absolute hell on the dark demon. They slaughtered the demon's army in minutes and managed to capture the massive apex beast alive. They dragged the struggling beast back to that occult shrine in the woods and trapped it deep underground. Yakiha looked at the Exorcist, the glow of his face dimming in the absolute darkness of the night. "But," Yakiha said, his voice dropping to a heavy, serious tone, "I couldn't kill it." The Exorcist looked confused. "You had your full power. Why didn't you just destroy it?" "Because the demon's life force wasn't tied to the spiritual realm," Yakiha explained. "It was tied to the dark magic of that severed human head buried at the shrine. As long as that human-made curse remained active in the soil, the demon could not die." Over the years, the demon's surviving cult members have been dragging humans and animals to that dirt patch to sacrifice them. They use those solid gold blades to feed the demon blood. Yakiha paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Once that demon drinks enough blood, it will break out of its underground prison. And if an apex demon of that level escapes, it won't just kill humans. It will ravage the entire spiritual realm as well. It will unleash an absolute apocalypse. Yakiha looked the Exorcist dead in the eyes. "That boy Minar, the one whose head was smashed into the dirt. I am the giant who killed him." The Exorcist froze, a chill running down his spine. "But it was a tragic accident," Yakiha continued, his voice filled with ancient regret. "The demon's cult was using paranormal mind control to lure the boy to the execution block. I appeared as a giant to scare him away, but the dark pull was too strong. When he got too close to the altar, I threw him backward to save him from being sacrificed. But I threw him too hard. His head hit the hard earth, and he died. If I hadn't intervened, they would have sacrificed him. The demon would have tasted his blood, and it would have escaped. Imagine how many people in your village would have died that night." The Exorcist sat back, processing the horrifying truth. "And the teenager? Dolan? I possessed the teenager just to find out who the most powerful holy man in this village was," Yakiha said, "and my spies told me it was you. Cleric, I am an entity made of fire. I cannot break human magic. Only a righteous human made of clay can break a dark human spell. I need you to come to the barren dirt patch tomorrow night. Recite your holy verses over the earth to break the necromancer's curse. Once the armor is broken, I will execute the demon myself." The Exorcist sat in silence for a moment. He was just a mortal man. Going into a cursed forest to face an apex demon was a death sentence. But he also knew that if he did nothing, his entire village would eventually be slaughtered. "I will do it," the Exorcist said. The next night, right after the evening prayers, the Exorcist walked alone into the pitch-black forest. He carried no weapons, just his faith. As he approached the 15 by 15 dirt patch, his spiritual vision was forced wide open. He gasped. Surrounding the perimeter of the dirt patch were thousands of horrifying, deformed demonic entities, the surviving cult members, fiercely defending the buried temple. They hissed and snarled, their eyes locked on the Exorcist. But standing between the mortal man and the demons was Yakiha. And behind Yakiha stood a massive, glowing army of elite interdimensional warriors. "Do not fear them, cleric," Yakiha's voice echoed in his mind. Walk to the center. The Exorcist stepped onto the barren dirt, He sat down, closed his eyes, and began intensely reciting the holy exorcism verses. As the ancient words left his mouth, the ground beneath him began to violently shake. The dirt started to crack and split open. The exorcist kept his eyes shut, his voice getting louder and more commanding. Suddenly, a deafening, grinding noise echoed through the forest. The massive, ancient stone temple literally began pushing its way up through the soil, violently rising out of the earth. "Your job is done, cleric," Yakiha shouted over the deafening roar of the earthquake. "Leave now. I will handle the rest." The exorcist didn't need to be told twice. He stood up, turned around, and began fast walking back toward the village. As he walked away, the ground behind him violently cracked open. He heard the terrifying, blood-curdling roars of ancient monsters clashing in the dark. But he never looked back. He kept his eyes focused forward and went straight home. The next morning, as soon as the sun came up, the exorcist returned to the forest. He walked quietly through the trees, making his way back to the exact coordinates. The massive stone temple was gone. The 15 by 15 foot square of bare dirt was back, looking exactly like it did before. But something was fundamentally different. The heavy, suffocating, evil energy that used to hang in the air was completely gone. However, the exorcist knew better than to trust the aftermath of dark magic. Even if Yakiha had successfully executed the apex demon, and his army had wiped out the cult, the residual dark energy of human sacrifice stains the earth forever. Blood had been spilled there. The ground itself was permanently tainted. He returned to the village, gathered every single person together, and laid down a strict, unbreakable law. No one is to ever step foot in that area again. He told them, "Do not farm there. Do not build houses there. Let the forest reclaim it." And the villagers listened. To this day, that exact spot remains completely untouched. The 15 by 15 patch of dirt still refuses to grow a single blade of grass, sitting dead in the middle of a dense, overgrown jungle. Local thrill seekers and paranormal investigators have visited the perimeter and taken photos, but absolutely no one dares to step inside that square. So guys, that is the wild and terrifying story of Yakiha. It leaves us with a pretty intense message. Greed and the lust for power will literally be your undoing. The British smuggler wanted a monopoly. The necromancer wanted ultimate dark power. And those two thieves in the 90s just wanted quick cash. Look how absolutely horrifying their ends were. It really makes you think about how dangerous the unseen world really is, and why some doors should simply never be opened. What did you guys think of Yakiha's story? I don't know if ancient interdimensional entities have YouTube in their realm, but if Yakiha is listening, thanks for the save, man. We appreciate it if you guys enjoyed this insane story. Make sure to drop a like and share this video with anyone who loves a good scare. And if you're new to the Shadows Prevail, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you never miss an upload. We have a lot more terrifying stories coming your way. Stay safe out there, protect your energy, and until next time, goodbye.